satisfies? You believe in a God that opens eyes? You believe in a God that tells you lies? Or do you believe in me? Do you believe in a God that brings you down? Do you believe in a God that wears the ground? Do you believe in a God that makes you bow? Or do you believe in me? Do you believe in a God that satisfies? You believe in a God that opens eyes? You believe in a God that tells you lies? Or do you believe in me? Do you believe in a God that brings you down? Do you believe in a God that wears the ground? Do you believe in a God that makes you bow? Or do you believe in me?
It's Beyond Common Sense. It's Lanny Sense with Lanny Swerdlow, KCAA's resident gay, woke, liberal, pot-smoking, race-mixing, tree-hugging, left-handed, science-affirming, Jewish, humanist, atheist, a white evangelical Christian nationalist, worst nightmare. Okay, hey, welcome. Here it is, Tuesday, May 21st, and we're on Lanny Sense. I want to welcome you for joining us tonight. We've got a great show for you tonight. We have our special guest, Professor Mike Whitty, who's going to be talking about cannabis and election 2024, so stick around for that. But first, an important announcement, and then a little interesting tidbit that I found that I think you might find of interest. First of all, last week, if you remember correctly, I made an announcement about a protest taking place in Temecula, protesting the Inland Empire Family PAC, which is a right-wing Christian fundamentalist organization with stealth for the Republican Party, and their goal is to take over and control every single school board here in the Inland Empire. Well, we were going to protest them, and I said, hey, it's going to be in Temecula and in Old Town Temecula, but due to safety and legal reasons, safety in that there's a bunch of crazy gun nuts going to this event, and legal reasons, they're like Trump. They just sue at the drop of a hat. We've moved it over to the fabulous Temecula Duck Pond. That's right. We're going to be picketing and protesting there, so please come and join us. 4:30 to 6:30. That's tomorrow, Wednesday, May 22nd. If you don't know where the fabulous Temecula Duck Pond Park is, it's at 28250 Inez Road, at the corner of Inez Road and Rancho California Road, the intersection there. And there's no parking at the Duck Park, but you can park right across the street at the shopping mall. So come and join us tomorrow. It's 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Bring a sign. Let's protest groups trying to take over our school boards, take away parental rights, make students feeling unwelcome and unsafe. Okay, now I've got an article I came across that I found very interesting, and I thought I'd like to read you parts of it. It's an article by a man by the name of A.G. Diane Jr. that was published in the Washington Post on May 19th, and it's entitled, "We're Letting Trump Distract Us from His Corrupt Anti-Climate Agenda." Donald Trump sat down with oil executives and told them that if he wins, he'll scrap a slew of President Biden's clean energy and other environmental regulations they don't like. And, as a kicker, eliminate $110 billion in taxes that they pay. The kicker, the thing is, though, they had to donate at least $1 billion to his campaign. The response from the media? Trump's pay-for-play move was frequently described as transactional. The right word would be corrupt. Last weekend at a rally in Wildwood, New Jersey, Trump pledged to halt offshore wind farms. All of them, right away. Quote, "We're going to make sure that ends on day one. I am going to write it out in an executive order," end quote. It was consistent with his remarkable statement that it was reported to have made to the energy execs where he said, quote, "I hate wind," end quote. No investigative reporting is required to see what Trump would do. His campaign website goes on and on about how he would, quote, "stop all Joe Biden's policies that distort energy markets," end quote, describing the president's approach as industry killing, job killing, pro-China, and anti-American. There could hardly be a clearer contrast between Trump and Biden, or their parties for that matter. You might think that the environment, and climate in particular, would be playing a large role in the 2024 debate. Yet for all the good work reporters are doing on these issues, there is a strange, substantive vacuum in this campaign. Citizens are getting plenty of information concerning Trump's latest polling numbers, and yes, lots of news on his hush money trial. About what he'd do if he wins again? Not so much. There's a raging argument over whether journalists have a special obligation to defend democracy against Trump's threat to it. For the record, I think they do. But that debate understates the challenge Trump presents to political coverage of all kinds. Let's count the ways. By violating so many norms simultaneously, while throwing out so much chaff in any given week, he dodges accountability. He is the only public figure in memory who dodges one scandal by getting enmeshed in a new one. Before the first scandal sinks in, the second sucks up all the oxygen, and then along comes a third. His $1 billion ask of super-rich oil guys gets barely mentioned a blip. The politics of spectacle that Trump excels at is the enemy of politics of substance. Take that New Jersey rally where he pledged to block offshore wind farms. He also pledged to block electric cars. This did not get much attention because the story's headline in the Washington Post referenced Trump to, quote, Hollywood's most famous cannibal. That's what the headline said, Hollywood's most famous cannibal. When Trump stated during the speech, quote, the late, great Hannibal Lecter is a wonderful man, end quote. Try arguing that climate change should have been the headline for that story. Doesn't get the traction. There is finally a problem that transcends Trump on climate especially, but on other issues as well. The best way to avoid a serious discussion is to transform a cause you oppose into yet another culture war skirmish. The overwhelming scientific consensus is that global warming is real and poses a grave danger to humanity. Those trying to evade tough measures to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels dismiss technical expertise and invent hidden motives. The climate movement, they say, wants to enhance the power of big government. It hates cars, doesn't care about people working in the oil fields, and despises the American way of life. Case closed. Trump is thus both a cause and a symptom of the distemper in our national life. On the climate and so many other questions, the nation has about 5 months to realize that very big things are at stake in November's choice. If we fail, Hannibal Lecter would be a fitting symbol for what will happen to our democracy. It's amazing. It's amazing. He said he's going to get us out of the Paris Peace climate accords once again. Just crazy. The only thing that could maybe turn this around and maybe wake up people to the horrors that's happening with climate change is that the science say the ocean temperature is 2 to 3 degrees warmer than normal, which should create a lot of hurricanes. Maybe they'll wipe out the state of Florida this year. And the high heat that they're predicting, they say that it's probably going to exceed the hottest ever. It goes right through the Midwest, through those red Republican states. Maybe they'll experience some of this new climate change, and maybe they'll come to their senses. But I wouldn't hold my breath. But who I would hold my breath for is our special guest tonight, Professor Mike Witte. Professor Witte is a retired professor specializing in employment law, business ethics, labor relations, collective bargaining, and drug policy. Interesting combination. He has spoken at many cannabis events, including the John Sinclair Memorial and at multiple rallies at the Michigan State Capitol. He is currently working on the Michigan 2024 campaigns to activate the cannabis voters, especially youth and progressives. Professor Whitty has taught at San Francisco State, the University of San Francisco, University of Santa Clara, Seattle University, and the University of Detroit. Professor Whitty, Professor Mike, thank you for joining us today on Lanny Sense. We're glad to have you here with us.
I'm glad to be with you. Been a member of California Normal under Dale Geringer's terrific leadership, and Michigan Normal, and we have a cannabis caucus like Brownie Mary in the Michigan Democratic Party, and I'm a board member of our Michigan ASA, Americans for Safe Access, and have spoken in recent years at Hash Bash, and have taught at Oaksterdam in drug policy at the University of Michigan, and many Drug Policy Alliance conferences over the years. Makes me honored and excited to be with you tonight, Lanny.
I got to ask you, what is Hash Bash? I got to know. You go sit around and bash hash?
The late John Sinclair, who died about a month ago, he kicked off the first Hash Bash when they arrested him for giving an undercover cop try to buy cigarettes, two marijuana cigarettes off an undercover cop. And then the Beatles, John Lennon came along with a song, 10 for 2. He got 10-year sentence for 2 joints.
Oh my gosh.
That was a little lore of my origins in becoming friends with Dana Beal and Jack Harrar and Dennis Perone and Dale Geringer and so many people like John Sinclair back in Michigan. We have something called Temple of Holy Smoke in Detroit, sort of like what Chris and Mickey have done with Cannabis Stay, mining the psycho-spiritual aspects of higher consciousness to heal ourselves and be at our best more often, have better batting average in life.
Well, you mentioned two of the most iconic figures in the cannabis movement, Dennis Perone and John, can't think of his last name, Hara, Jack Hara.
Yes.
Did you know these gentlemen?
Yes, I did. I knew Jack from his trips into Michigan's Hash Bash as a speaker, and Dennis Perone, who I met at a rainbow gathering in southern Missouri, and he invited me to check in with him when I came to SF State, and I did, and I became part of the philosophic family sitting at his kitchen table, and gave me a whole different way of holding San Francisco.
Those kitchen table, I stayed at Dennis Perone's castle as well, and those kitchen round table sessions were really fascinating. Besides getting really stoned, of course, it was always an interesting evening. Okay, well, let's get to a little bit about you and eventually into politics. How long have you had a profound interest in cannabis, and what brought you to cannabis?
Well, what brought me to cannabis was a lifestyle to relax and forgive and heal myself and transition to, a different person today than I was in my late teens or early 20s. So I'm thankful for cannabis being one of the therapists that was helpful to me over the years and still is to a significant degree.
I'm very.
So I'd like people to benefit from the psychology of cannabis and even the individual spirituality each of us construct through our lifetime experiences, however it ends up being, however we want to name it. It's still an aspect of expressing ourselves as a human being and being kinder and friendlier and more loving toward ourselves and toward our world. And we'd have a peaceful world and a safer world.
Kindness and loving is the absolute basis of cannabis, and how it instills a more peaceful and tranquil world. And that's alcohol. So that's sometimes I feel that's why it was so opposed by so many, because alcohol makes you mean and nasty, and cannabis makes you loving and kind and thoughtful. And we don't want that, do we?
Friendly and adaptable. In so many ways adaptable, and not take the small things as seriously, not overreact, underreact where you can. Saves you wear and tear and stress. And of course, I'm a little bit stressed out about the election. I'm worried that we haven't mobilized and focused our cannabis voter so they see clearly that we will make modest, slow but modest progress with the Democrats. We'll be frozen out by the Republicans because we'll be demonized as one more aspect of super liberalism, the cultural wars, too permissive about marijuana. It's immoral to smoke marijuana, and that sort of approach. For us, it's alien, but for the religious conservative, it's not. We forget that. We can't stand in the other person's shoes long enough to grasp how they think about things, and different than how we think about things. But I urge people who are listening to join a local Democratic club, speak up, introduce the issue politely, where we're relevant and reasonable, introduce it in Q&A to candidates, especially in primaries, contested primaries, but for the fall election. And this applies to a Republican listener. We need to have those Republicans who smoke cannabis organize Republicans for drug policy reform and educate their own membership. Because the conservatives talk about freedom and liberty, and the left talks about freedom and liberty on different subjects. But hey, maybe we could get a break for the cannabis smoker. It's not going to destroy the rest of civilization. In fact, it may help civilization. We may be offering a kinder, gentler world of the future.
Well, we already know that cannabis isn't going to destroy things because, when all the legalization movements, Proposition 64 in California and the other legalization movements, the people opposed to us, like safer alternatives, smart alternatives to cannabis, were predicting mayhem and carnage on our highways and children smoking marijuana up the yin-yang if legalization passed. Well, legalization passed, and all their horror stories have not come true, not one of them. And it's been very beneficial wherever it's become legalized, besides raising a lot of money for the state and local governments. It's also, the children actually in minors, cannabis smoking has gone down a bit from what it was before legalization. And I really was surprised by that. I really thought it would go up with legalization, but it went down. And the reason I believe that happened is because the kids saw mom and dad smoking marijuana, and they says, "Oh, it's not cool anymore. I'm not going to do that."
Well, it could be some truth in that. And we've been stereotyped, and we still have to wrestle with the stigma of cannabis and find ways to ease the pressure. And getting cannabis on the agenda, even introducing it in the primaries in August, and to introduce it to both parties and to the candidates, including the presidential candidates, is useful for the dedicated cannabis activists. Hopefully they're listening in tonight, and there's a way you store an archive of these shows, so we could really use a rallying cry to remain active even if we lose, if we go through a harsh period of neo-fascism. If we stand by our core issues, our top 5 issues that really touch our hearts and we'll sacrifice our lives for, then we will be leaders of the resistance during a difficult winter. And we may face that, but we need to face it bravely with courage and hope and optimism that in the long haul, human unity and people getting along is vastly more wished for and preferred by humans than trouble with each other of any kind. And I just traveled through 4 countries of Europe with my wife, Gail, kind of a celebration of our 55th wedding anniversary. And people were in a good mood and very friendly. And if you were friendly, they were friendly. And if you were smiling, they were smiling. So there is some rapport between humanity. It gives me hope that we'll see light at the end of the tunnel in this election, and that people do what they can to persuade the undecided, the swing voter, the person who rather intellectually lazily says, "I don't like either one of them," as if they're equally bad. They're not equally bad. One person is super out of hand and unpredictably bad. I won't name the person, but I do have a talk I give called Love Trumps Hate. So the other guy is an old style, basic mainstream moderate Democrat who some people, thanks to Fox, think is a big left-wing president. He's not a big left-wing president. Bernie Sanders would have been that big left-wing president, but it wasn't to be. And, Joe Biden is just a practical guy from Delaware trying to run the country by his best lights under terrible handicaps, one of which is the Electoral College itself. But in addition to that, the media treatment of the sensational gives the moderate and the more agreeable person less visibility, and it gives the lunatic a feature treatment on the evening news. No wonder we have the problems we have. It's the internet and the social media and the empowerment. Everyone can be Napoleon. Everybody can be Hitler. All they have to do is podcast something or attach themselves to TikTok as an influencer or something like that. So I hope we're going to be able to rouse our cannabis rank and file. I hope our well-funded big players can lean in a little bit more in a focused way so we can build some muscle in the field, and that we pay a little attention to this election because it's a vital election. 30 allies of ours which support us on our issues are also targeted by the far right. There are about 30 causes that are targeted by the far right. If we saw we had a common foe, we could have unity across these causes. If people would cross-network to causes they don't generally spend much time with, but they make an outreach because of the election, you're going to get new allies. We're going to have stronger coalitions. We're going to have a shot at holding Michigan and winning the Senate seat and maybe picking up 1 or 2 seats in Congress if we get real lucky. But that's going to be turning out our base, young people and working class folks and union folks to talk to union people. It's very helpful.
And
okay,
and that's
Lanny.
and
Yeah.
that's why Biden has done something that no former president has done, and that whether it's Bush or Barack Obama, whoever, Biden has actually got cannabis pulled out of Schedule 1 of the controlled substances. The Schedule 1 listing is horrid. No safe use, no medical use. You can't research. He has got it pulled out, and it's going to be put in Schedule 3. It looks like the DEA is going to approve it. There's been a little stumbling block right now, but there's more pressure being put on the DEA. If Trump gets in, you could kiss that off because Trump is beholden to the police. I've seen all these pictures of Trump surrounded by police, and police want to see drugs and cannabis, especially cannabis, made illegal again because they have lost a lot of money because cannabis is legal. We used to spend $20 billion a year arresting almost 500,000 people across the country on cannabis offenses. And now it's dropped way, way down. In a lot of states, there's hardly any that have legalized it. There's hardly any arrests. I like to point to Colorado, where in 2012 they legalized cannabis. And in 2012, over 80,000 people a year were arrested for cannabis offenses. Now it is less than 2,000 people a year. That's a huge reduction. And I've always wanted to call up a reporter for the Denver Post and say, I've got a great idea for a story for you. Why don't you find out what the police, with 78,000 less people being arrested, what are the police doing with all this extra time that they don't have to spend arresting marijuana people anymore? That's a lot of money.
Yeah, if the police could cut down the burglaries and the car thefts and the larceny, that would be a better use of their time.
And that's what they should be doing, but they want to get back to busting people. And young people need to realize that Biden has worked for them in many, many cases, but this marijuana reform is going to be gone. if the Republicans take over Congress. And states that have legalized it may start finding problems like that. I liked what you said about people need to get involved in the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party is very supportive of legalization. And if we need to get Democrats elected to office because it's Democrats that support legalization. And we need to get young people involved in the party. And I can assure you, you would be very welcome to get involved in the party. If you're thinking about getting involved in the party, the way to do it's very easy. Go contact your Democratic Central Committee. So if you're, let's say, live in Sacramento County, go to Google and type in Sacramento County Democratic Central Committee, and you'll come up with their website with phone numbers and information how you can contact them and how you can get involved. That's how you can make a difference.
Yes, and people can join a local Democratic club. They make an influence on the primary in a big way, especially contested primaries in both parties. There's room for a lot more creative things, including voter registration to help young people get more excited about this election and have a long view of it, not a narrow. It's not a personality contest. It's a matter of policy and the future of humanity and the planet. It's not really about short-run economics or the two parties. There's something bigger at stake, and government maybe will miss the boat on it. I hope not, because I'm not sure the private sector is much better at managing mega crises, like losing our water table in North America. But we've tapped the water table and shrank a lot of small farmers' access to water for their crops.
Well, because it's for big business, it's all about big money, and the health and welfare of the people be damned. Say, listen, tell us about Michigan. What is going on regarding cannabis politics in Michigan?
Well, we've lost a big activist in Rick Thompson and John Sinclair, but we have a active Michigan NORML, a chapter of Americans for Safe Access, a Michigan chapter. But we have a dynamic subculture with art and music and kind of making politics fun and in a low-key way, being cannabis friendly. So we really have a little underground in Detroit. We'd like to give you tours of those who to come to the Midwest in the summer when it's dry and warm. You're welcome to come. And we love California as well and look forward to spending October in California in the Bay Area in a house sit in Berkeley and take Bart over to the city and try to help with the elections in San Francisco.
Well, now,
I'd sure like feedback on people helping knock off a congressperson who's in a flippable seat or in state legislature. Grassroots action, even school boards and libraries are critical in this stage of the game.
Well, we have if you're interested in that in particular, I want to get back to Michigan in a second, but you brought up flipping a state. Right here in California, in Congressional District 41, we have a race between Democrat Will Rawlins and Republican Ken Calvert. Ken Calvert has been in Congress for a long time. He has been given an F rating by NORML on cannabis reform. Will Rawlins, on the other hand, is gotten an A rating, and he is fully behind supporting cannabis. And this is a seat that could very well be flipped from red to blue. We need to get rid of Ken Calvert. He is reactionary, not just on cannabis, but so many other issues, including abortion and rights for LGBT and so forth and so on. And so this is a seat that, if you live here in Southern California, especially if you live in the California 31st District, which is in the Inland Empire, this is a race to get involved in. This is a seat we can flip, and we can make this is a real positive development for cannabis. But you're right, Mike. There is so many seats that are going to be won by just really a small number of votes. And if you get involved in those races, you could actually help swing those votes to our candidate.
And maybe a good project for the cannabis activist listeners on this show tonight is to recognize you can play a outsized role in the primary, and perhaps find at least one or two people in contested primaries will champion the cannabis cause and call for legalization. That's not within, that's possible. That's a practical thing. One or two people can manage that. And yet there's room to create more chapters of Brownie Mary or versions of it in all 50 states, but specifically spread Brownie Mary into more big cities of California.
Yeah, because we need to, because Proposition 64, although we legalized cannabis in 2016, Proposition 64 was not written to produce cannabis nirvana. It was written so it will pass. And it did pass, but now it's up to us to make Proposition 64 into cannabis nirvana, and that's only going to happen when we elect people to the state legislature that are going to enact the proper laws. Listen, Michigan legalized cannabis, haven't they?
Yes, they have.
What is the law like, and how is it going?
Well, they're getting along with the state government regulator. There are moments when they recall things that are not properly labeled, or they suspect they weren't tested and they came from the gray market, black market, and so forth, mixed in with the vendor products to the big legal dispensaries. But we had medical, then we went to adult recreational, and we're, I think, a number 2 or 3 state in sales and revenue. I think we're right there in the top 5 in terms of marketplace and revenue, even though the prices have been depressed for various reasons. But we've got a open Senate seat. It's contestable by both parties. We got to carry Michigan for Biden, or he can't do the Electoral College without Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania at the bare minimum. And then in 1 or 2 random states like Arizona might tip it for Biden. It'll be a close election. And yet we must steel ourselves to recognize that we will come on the cultural war attack list more openly and on a more sweeping level under a Trump administration, because it'll be target anything that arouses your base, and anything that makes you pious, and you're working for the Lord, and you're anointed by God to do the work of Trump. That sort of thinking is going to haunt us. We'll be stuck with a new version of a cannabis stigma, a new version of it, using medicine and children's safety and seniors overdosing and going to emergency rooms. There's a lot of issues that we need to kind of monitor ourselves, clean up our act, protect each other, educate each other. Medicine doesn't know our world, but we know some of it, not all of it, but we know some of it. So if we pool our talents, we can educate each other and protect each other, especially the senior people who may take too many gummies at once and have a bad experience. Yeah. So always start in moderation, cut things up, take them in small bites, be cautious, be thoughtful. That's what old age is, a time of wisdom and self-care, and hopefully higher consciousness induced by the sacred herb.
Well, it's true that senior citizens are going in higher numbers to emergency rooms after overdosing on cannabis edibles. That's true, but still, the number of senior citizens going to emergency rooms overdosing on cannabis is a drop in the bucket compared to the number of senior citizens going to emergency rooms because of alcohol consumption.
Yeah,
and also, alcohol consumption will kill them. In cannabis, overconsumption doesn't kill them. They may not have a very comfortable trip, but the next day they'll be just fine.
Yeah, we've demonized and overdone our reaction to and the penalties associated with cannabis. It's strange how cultures get the little ticks and little attitudes towards something and over stigmatize it and over punish.
Well, I can assure you that a lot of the senior citizens I know say, you come and take my cannabis, you'll take it over my dead body, because they know how good it is for them for sleep and for movement disorders and for pain and so forth and so on. It's absolutely amazing. And it actually, cannabis is a senior citizen's best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, listen, you had written me about, and I wanted to touch on this because I wanted you to elaborate a little bit about it, but you had talked about, you'd like to talk about the aspects of visionary, futurist projections of ultimate cannabis possibilities. What is that?
Well, the possible human could be a human with higher consciousness. So we wouldn't hoard so much. We wouldn't have too many pair of shoes and more clothes than we can wear. We could live a lot simpler and still enjoy life and have fun and friends and parties and all the things that humans crave. That's still possible on a modest income if you think of entertaining each other and pooling your talents. And I have a thought that at least cannabis helped me open up to these sweeping visionary possibilities. And it's philosophy in a certain sense, and that is a legitimate field in college. Usually you have to take 2 philosophy courses to get an undergraduate degree. So philosophy is nothing more than your sense of life, your sense of reality, your vision of the possible, things that you care enough about to articulate and speak of, like I am on these topics here in this conversation. I think cannabis could help us change how we deal with each other, and it could bring a lot more emotional peace and reduce stress, and contribute to being comfortable with being alive, and not anxious and worried and fearful and angry at being alive. That's our problem that we're facing in this election. That's why we have to find some way to communicate that to the swing voter, to the person who's unsure, hasn't made their mind up, or says rather lazily, in my mind, I don't like either one of them. It's not a matter of liking either one of them. It's a matter of basic policy. Do you want to give the humans a little bit of breathing room, a little bit of freedom, or do you want to punish people as much as you can and have as tight a grip on them as neither government or a corporate boss over his workforce? They're similar. They're not dissimilar. Somebody has all the power, and most people have very little of it. Well, in most jobs, regardless of whether they're private sector jobs or public sector jobs.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you had mentioned ultimate cannabis possibilities. And to me, the ultimate cannabis possibility that would be the most beneficial to humanity would be the use of cannabis to replace alcohol. That is its greatest possibility, and that's why there's a bill here in California, AB 1775, that would allow dispensaries with cannabis lounges to sell food, non-cannabis-based beverages, and to have live events and sell tickets for concerts and dances and all this kind of stuff, just like bars and taverns do. And instead of people going to these places and getting inebriated with alcohol when they go to hear music or to dance, they'll go to these places in their communities where they will smoke cannabis and eat some cannabis and listen to music and hear performers and socialize. This will make a major difference if people break away from alcohol as a social lubricant and instead use cannabis. We need a social lubricant. That's the way humans are. We have always used drugs of some kind. Before, we were using it before we were probably human, different kinds of plants and stuff. It's essential to our well-being, and cannabis can provide all those social benefits without all the dangers that are associated with alcohol and many of the other psychedelics.
I agree. I just think we have to find some way where we don't forget about the medical aspect of cannabis, because that's a doorway to speaking to people's gut fears about their own health and longevity, and parents or grandparents or children. It touches people in the life cycle. Um, I think that there's a lot to be said for including cannabis in a hospice, so people can accept their own death.
Absolutely, cannabis should be at a hospital. They're allowed to do it here in California now. You can have cannabis in hospices, and it's obviously one of the best things for a patient who is terminal to smoke some cannabis. They'll come to peace with themselves. But cannabis, is medicinal, and it's so important medicinally. That's just a given. I can't. What's interesting is most people in the United States, I think the polls show 80% of the people in the United States now believe that cannabis does have significant medicinal uses. And, you talked about Dennis Perone. Dennis Perone was a genius in realizing that pushing cannabis medically was the way to begin legalization. And Proposition 215 in 1996, which legalized cannabis when recommended by a doctor, people began thinking about the medicinal benefits of cannabis, and more people have discovered the medicinal benefits of cannabis. And it was a brilliant strategy of Dennis Perone to inaugurate the beginnings of legalization of cannabis as a medicine. And I remember seeing this video of him in which he says, after Proposition 215 passed, what he said was, Proposition 215 is the beginning of the end of the war on drugs. And he was right. He was right on. And we owe Dennis Perone a tremendous debt of gratitude for getting this, for having the ability to get this going and to get the right people in the campaign to get it passed here in California. It literally changed the world.
Yeah. Well, we need crusaders. That's absolutely true. And we need allies. And the criminal justice movement has a number of pretty strong footholds and legitimacy. Plus, our cause, not only to end stigma, but to get acceptance, can embrace freedom and liberty. I hear the slogans from the left about freedom and liberty for some of their priorities, and I hear the phrase freedom and liberty from the right about some of their priorities. So maybe freedom and liberty can be put into the mix too, and we can still call for being friendly and good neighbors, and having stronger communities, and in some communalism here in America, experimental communities, co-ops and things like that. But gee, there's got to be a little bit of individual freedom and acceptance of the fact that no two of us are exactly alike. So we're going to have a live and let live world, and let people make their own choices, and assume that most of the time they're not going to be making them on our front door or our front porch or on our lawn. So we don't need to overreact to some people who appear different than us and who we're a little nervous about. But we don't have to, for the most part, we don't even have to contend with those remote concerns. We have to contend with how we live our own lives, how we treat others, how we treat ourselves, whether we forgive ourselves and forgive others, and whether we can accept life and trust the world and trust yourself to the world, but be accepting of what's on your plate and know you have enough resources and talent to handle it. Well, so you only get what you can handle.
Cannabis instills a person to be more tolerant and more understanding. And, just as an example, I know this sounds kind of flippant, but we've got this horrible war going on between Hamas and Israel. Tens of thousands of people being killed, and they're not talking. What's interesting, that I like to always point out, is that this animosity between Muslims and Christians and Jews and different Muslim sects, Sunnis and Shias, is nothing new under the sun. It's been going on for hundreds of years. But they didn't used to be at each other's throats killing each other. And I'd like to point out, well, back then, 50, 80, 100 years ago, every social situation where people would sit down to talk and discuss things, it was always accompanied by hookahs with cannabis in it. And they would smoke the cannabis, and the cannabis would help make them more tolerant and more understanding of each other, so they wouldn't be at each other's throats. And then for some reason, even though the Muslims say we're the great devil and all this kind of stuff, they bought into the anti-cannabis thing, and they don't use it anymore. And when they sit down, they don't use cannabis in social situations or in discussions when leaders get together. And what I suggest is that they got to get back to that. And maybe when the Muslims sit down with the Christians, they sit down with the Jews, and they smoke some cannabis, maybe they'll become a little more tolerant and understanding of each other, and they'll stop murdering each other. I figure it wouldn't hurt to try, would it? Yeah. Maybe it wouldn't work, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to try. Let's try 1 year of every time that Jews and Muslims and Hamas and Israel and all this sit down and talk beforehand, they smoke some pot. And then let's see how the conversation goes.
Yeah, I was overseas with my wife in Tangier, Morocco. We went to the Kasbah, and in the midst of this very old-fashioned Kasbah with very Muslim and very traditional headgear, and you really felt you were somewhere new and different. There was a Jewish cemetery, and the guy led us in and toured us. The Jewish cemetery dates from something like the 13th century, when the Jews were expelled from Spain and they fled to Tangier and created a small community there. So it's people can get along if are given a reasonable chance, and we can reconcile our differences, even in family, just by saying that's a blind spot someone has. Let go of it. Don't create problems for yourself. Don't pick on people. Just accept that they have some blind spots on cultural issues or political issues, or they have their upbringing and what they've consumed, and maybe they were born on Fox. They had their birth. It was right on Fox TV.
Well, getting back to what this show was, we've kind of gone on to why cannabis needs to be legal and easily available. Let's get back to, we only have a few minutes left, what we have to do to make sure that it stays legal and easily available. One of the things that really gets me and is that cannabis is too damn expensive. It should be cheap, and it's a plant.
Well, the thing people should do is grow their own and give it to their friends. And that's how it started in my introduction to cannabis. Somebody passed a joint around a big circle, and you got a puff or two on it. It came to you free. It was a gesture of love for a healing circle or a holy circle.
But cannabis selling for, I don't know what it sells for in Michigan, but here in California, it's now down. It used to be over $2,000 to $3,000 a pound. Now the wholesale level is down to around $1,000 a pound. But that's still absurd. There is no agricultural product anywhere that in its basic unprocessed form sells for $1,000 a pound.
The medical movement, I thought people would grow their own and take care of themselves in a greater degree than proves to be the case. But what we should do is encourage people, grow your limit, whatever the state limit is, grow it, harvest it, become a reasonably good gardener, share with your friends, and save the high price aspect of it to somebody else.
Well, but the thing
grow your own, and this helps low-income people even more than the high-income.
It does if you have a place to grow, but people live in apartments. It makes it very difficult to grow a quantity that people need. Frankly, cannabis should be the same price as tomatoes, $3 a pound. It isn't any more difficult to grow cannabis than tomatoes. But even if it was 10 times more difficult, then we're talking $30 a pound, and no one's going to quibble about paying $30 a pound for cannabis. we've got to get the price down.
And don't forget, we do hope we could be counted among those coalitions that vote to defend themselves against fascism and reject Trump. But my God, even if Trump, by some horrible erosion of our luck and history, he becomes the president, we have to stick to our guns and become a little more creative in how we advance the cannabis cause under a bad administration that might demonize us and add us to the hit list of bad causes.
Absolutely correct. And I'm very concerned about that. Like I expressed it a little earlier, Trump and the police are like this. They're really tight. And I believe that if Trump gets elected, he is going to unleash the police to do whatever they want anywhere in the country. And that's going to be very frightening because they will go after us once again.
I worry for that. I think there's a danger of that. Yes.
Absolutely. Oh, I don't. He said as much, and just look at how he surrounds himself with police. It's very, very frightening. Well, Professor Whitty, we're going to have to wrap things up. Is there any other thing you would like to get out there? Is there a way people can contact you, for example, if they'd like to talk to you about this?
Sure. My email is Mike, WHITTY, at Prodigy, PRODIGY.net. Mike Whitty, one word, WHITTY, at Prodigy, PRODIGY.net.
There you go. And you could write Professor Whitty, and I am sure he could provide you with all kinds of really good information.
I do matchmaking and networking and arm people to win this damn election, and then we have a seat at the table and we have reasonable hopes for progress. I'm optimistic in the end. I think in the long haul we win. I just hope in the short run we win also. So even though Biden's not perfect, he's clearly the lesser of two evils, and we should vote for Biden.
And you should vote for the other Democratic legislators on the state level and the congressional level. This is how we...
Especially your congressional election, if you have a defeatable Republican, that may make all the difference in the world. If Trump wins and he gets the House and the Senate, he has already got the Supreme Court. We're in for a tough decade. Yeah. And just stay strong and brave and courageous and hopeful and optimistic, and we'll make it through, and we'll build our life legacies.
Okay. Well, Professor Whitty, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And we'll have you on again sometime, maybe, and maybe after the election, we'll have you on to do an analysis of what happened.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was Professor Mike Whitty talking about election 2024, and he is so right. Listen, people, you've got to get involved. You know, you like to smoke a little cannabis, but get off your duff and get involved. And like I say, if you're a Republican, then get involved in the Republican Party. Start a cannabis caucus in the Republican Party, but get involved in the Democratic Party because they're the ones who have really been passing the laws to make things better. Okay. So next week, we've got another special show for you, and this is kind of going in a slightly different, completely different direction. We're going to have on our show next week Linda Castro. Linda is the policy director for Cal Wild, and she's going to be speaking on the proposed Chuckawalla National Monument, which will protect lands adjacent to Joshua Tree National Park. It'll improve access to nature, honor cultural landscapes, protect biodiversity, and conserve wildlife habitat. This Chuckawalla National Monument is really something. It's going to be big, and we've got to get it through. I'm really concerned. I'm going to ask her this question. They're trying to get Biden to declare this is a national monument. If he doesn't do it, do you really think Donald Trump is going to declare it a national monument? He'll probably build a strip mall there with a casino operating to give competition to the native casino in 29 Palms. So, once again, hey, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Lanny Sense, the show that's beyond common sense. Please tell your friends, and don't forget, we're here. You can listen to us 24/7. Just go to kcaradio.com and click on Lanny Sense, and they'll bring up all the past shows. Tell your friends, tell everyone. Lanny Sense, KCA Radio, and tell your friends, smoke cannabis. it's good for you. Good night.
KCAA Loma Linda. The Legacy KCAA 1050 AM and Express 106.
This ain't Texas.